Okay, so this is part two, week one, Ecology and Society. You made it this far. Nice work. I just want to give a pretty brief, quick overview of the readings this week and the broader ideas of social ecological systems and resilient thinking. So here's kind of the problem, right? The world is currently threatened by lots of different threats to fisheries, lakes, forest. Biodiversity is reducing. Climate change is a concern. So, essentially, there are a lot of environmental ecological problems. The real context of this problem is that all resources of concern are embedded within social ecological systems. Ecology and society are interwoven together. What we need to try to understand is that these are complex systems. There are relationships from the local to the global scale. There are relationships between now and the future and between now and the past, so the temporal scale. Really what social ecological systems is a new framework, or a framework, that starts to draw on familiar concepts and a familiar language that interdisciplinary researchers can use and can think about to work together to start to really think about these complex ecological and social problems. And so what is resilience? Resilience is going to be a really key theme throughout this course. So broadly, resilience is a framework for viewing social ecological systems as one system over linked scales of time and space. Resilience reflects the ability of people, communities, societies, and cultures to live and develop with change. It's an understanding that our environments, the ecology of our systems, and the sociology of our systems are always changing. Resilience is the ability to bounce back following a shock or disturbance. Think about a wildfire or hurricane to a system. It's the ability to build and increase the capacity for learning and adaptation. Learning is a really important part of social ecological systems thinking. And it's the degree to which a system is capable of self-organization. So how do the social and the ecological parts fit together? How are they organized? And it emphasizes feedback. Positive feedback may reinforce system behavior. Negative feedback may modify system behavior. So again, what is a social ecological system? We all live in social systems. This class is a social system. The university is a social system. Community, the state, the nation, the world. And all of these social systems are embedded in ecological systems. It really is the human domain and the biophysical domain are interdependent. And to really start understanding the system, we need to understand how these pieces are linked, right? How ecology and society are connected. Social ecological systems are complex adaptive systems. We'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by that next week. But simply, they don't change in predictable linear or incremental fashions. So the classic example here is think about Newton's physics in the way you hit a cue ball on a pool table. That cue ball is going to react to the pool stick in a predictable linear way. But typically, society, ecology, doesn't respond in that predictable linear way. Resilience of a social ecological system is the capacity to absorb disturbance and undergo change while still retaining similar structure, similar function, and similar feedbacks. So if you've done the readings, you've come across this in the article by Elinor Ostrom in Science. Just an important side note, Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2010. She really did a great job of putting these kinds of considerations on the international intellectual map. So if you read the Ostrom reading already, and if you haven't, you'll see this soon, but basically they present this diagram. The diagram is a simplified version of what we think about when we talk about social ecological systems. It has several components, the subsystems. So for example, a resource system, we think about a designated protected park that can encompass a specific territory. Resource units, what are the resources that we're interested in? For example, trees, shrubs, plants, wildlife, water. We think about the governance system. What is the government or non-governmental agencies that manage the park, for example? What kind of rules are used? How are those rules made? How are decisions made about management? And the users. Think about individuals. So in the example of say a national park, the individuals who use the park for recreation, for sustenance, any other ways. All these subsystems are interacting, and you have to think about this in the broader social, economic, and political context. Okay, I want to quickly give a couple of examples here. So think about the social ecological system of Glacier National Park. The resource system would be Glacier National Park. It has defined boundaries that encompass the park. For this example, let's think about the grizzly bears being a resource unit. The governance system here is pretty well defined. The National Park Service makes decisions about the management of Glacier National Park. We think about users. Users might be recreationists, tribes near the park, specifically the Blackfeet Nation, has certain rights and sustenance access to the park. Biologists who are interested in studying and researching grizzly bears. Relatively straightforward example that helps you start thinking about these different component parts. Here's another example. See Glacier National Park is right here. Well, same example, but illustrating spatial and temporal scale. Glacier National Park, but really it's just a smaller scale nested within this larger crown of the continent ecosystem. So particularly when you were thinking about grizzly bears, they use that entire system move in and out of the park across national forest lands, BLM, across the Canadian border, through private lands, often in the valley bottoms, which are really productive parts of the system for grizzly bears. So you start to think about that spatial scale. Then also thinking about the temporal scale. There's a picture of a glacier in Glacier National Park in 1950. There's that same perspective today, a couple years ago. So you think about change over space and over time. One more example to show a little bit more, illustrate more the complexity. When you start thinking about social ecological systems, it's possible to get very complex very quickly. So let's think about the resource system in this example being the Texas Hill Country. It's an interconnected water and land system. For this example, let's think about resource units of consideration being water. Water, in some ways similar to grizzly bears, is a mobile resource, moves across boundaries and across space. To add a little bit of complexity here, water in the hill country is both surface, so the springs, creeks, rivers that run through the hill country, but also subsurface, multiple layers of aquifer underneath the hill country. So here we're getting a little bit more complex. There's not really one governance system that makes decisions about management. But we need to think about the state laws, which are very different with regards to surface water versus subsurface water. Private landowner boundaries, thousands of individual landowner boundaries, each landowner able to make significant decisions about how either the land and or the water is managed based on their preferences and needs. You have groundwater conservation districts, which have some level of management decision-making authority, river authorities, pretty complex governance system. When you think about the users, think about sportsmen and recreationists who are using the rivers, and then the water users. The water from the hill country as a primary source for both Austin through surface water of the Colorado River, as well as San Antonio through the Edwards Aquifer. Those landowners have rights and use the water in different ways. And also think about agriculture, both in the hill country, but then even all the way down towards the coast. Lots of rice farming is dependent on the water that comes out of the hill country. So very quickly, the complexity of social ecological systems, or the ecology and society of the Texas Hill Country becomes apparent. So hopefully that was helpful in a very broad general sense. It's a kind of a big picture outline or overview of some of the readings today, and really what we're going to be working on and thinking about throughout the semester. So just some reminders and what's up next week. Do the readings if you haven't already done them. It's important to do the readings in this course. It is an online course, online learning. Those readings are one of your primary sources of information. Don't forget to participate on the class wiki. I've posed a couple of questions, and be sure and access it and add your thoughts to the class discussion. Learn how to use the wiki this week. Then next week we'll be doing 2 readings on resilience. One from 1973 when the term was sort of first coined or first widely used, and then one from very recently, almost last month. Alright, thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.